This is a wooden post. We've already painted it in the grey, given it a wash, so we've got two tones of the grey under there, and then simply just brushing over it and picking out the very tops of it with this lighter wood colour, which when it is very thin looks quite grey, so looks like faded grey, and I think that looks quite effective. We will do a little bit more with it once the fence is built up and in place. Obviously we need the fence to look damp, and we might put some algae and stuff like that on it and what have you. So there's various little things we can do. The key here is not to overdo anything, which is always a bit trickier than you would imagine it should be. Now there's one that's going to be near the gate, and we're going to want to show that perhaps a little bit more worn. So we're just going to do the edges where people might have been kicking, rubbing, but still we need to blend that in. There we go. So that's what we're doing. Let's have a look at how that looks on one of the fences. Now we've done the posts. So if we take this small one first, so exactly the same process. We'll start at the top and we'll drag it down, blending it in as we go, and you can see it's really lightening the wood there. Now we're going to want some dark staining on here where it's damp and stuff like that, and we will do that with oils once it's in place, but that gives you a real nice feel for the texture, a nice sort of basic wooden look that we can start with. Right, time to get the base colours down for the woodwork. I'm going with this blue shade. I think it'll be a nice way of, you can put some dark washes on and make it a little bit darker, and we can do some more fading on it. I just think it's a nice shade. It's 89 middle blue. So going to start just by blocking out the look at that, blocking the parts in with the colour, and then we'll put the effects on it. So the opposite of what we're doing with the rest of the woodwork. And once we've got this down, I think we're then ready to give everything a bit of a matte coat. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I'm not unhappy with that. Just interesting. I think there's a little bit of flash in between, which I hadn't noticed, which goes all the way up, which is why that paint is collecting there. It's not viewable front on, just when you're looking at it upwards at that angle, so I'm not going to worry about it. I think the blue will be a nice contrast to all the other colours that we've got going on in here. Not just in the house where we've got all these sort of quite low-toned colours, but we've also got the relatively grey fence, and then we've got the pavement and stuff. So this dash of brightness, I think, will be most welcomed. Okay, let's have a look at the door. And I always say you should paint a model door as you would paint a real door. So on a real door, you go with a grain, and you should do that when you're doing a model as well. If you're brush painting, obviously. If you're airbrushing, it's not realistic anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that, I think. Right, you get the idea. I'll crack on. Well, I have to say that paint's gone down really, really well. I'm happy with that. It's only needed one coat to achieve what I wanted, so really happy with that. Now, what I want to do is keep what we've got here wet for a minute, because we can give this a wash now, and then we can start using this paint to do chipping and what have you onto the wood. So I'm going to wash my brush and we'll get right. So I want to give the woodwork that we painted a wash, and I'm going to use this Wash for Wood. It's a Mid Productions product, and I have got some additional thinner we can put in that if we need to. Let's see what it's like straight from the bottle. So I never apply a wash directly to my model. I always like to decant it into something first, and then I can decide whether I need to dumb it down or not. So this is a very, very dark liquid, and it's a sort of put it on, wipe it off type of wash. So if I show you, paint it on there, that sort of idea. So I think what I want to do is just thin it down a little bit. So let's do that. Let's clean my brush up first. There we go. So this is an enamel, so it is a little bit whiffy. So we'll just put a little bit of thinner in that. And by thinning it, what we're doing is actually speeding up the process a little bit. Just put a couple of drops of thinner in. It'll be thinner in the first instance, and as the thinner flashes off, the pigment will settle as it would have done before. But what we're doing now is we're speeding that process up because it's going to settle quicker. So you can see there it's thinner already. And because we're enamel, we've got a little bit of time to play with this. What I'm really looking for is for this to settle into all our little wood grains. And basically it's going to add a little bit of shadow and depth. The thing with washes is they never look great when you first put them on, but the effect you get at the end can be really good. So I'm just going to do this first piece. It's always worth giving it a little bit of time to dry before you start manipulating it. If you go in too quick with thinner to clean it up and what have you, you can actually lift more product. So you want it to have dried a little bit. Okay. So by doing it one at a time, I feel like I have a little bit more control. I don't know whether that's just psychological or what that is, but I think sometimes if you just go at it and splash it all on, you can put multiple layers in areas and make it just that little bit too thick if you're not careful. There we go, making sure we've got nothing left without a wash on it. Okay, so that's the first wash done. Now I'm saying first wash because once we've put the paint on here, we'll wash it again to key it all in. Well, what I want to do now is just start lifting some of that wash out. So we'll use some thinner for that. So let me just get another palette. And what I'm going to do now with I'm just going to put a little bit on my brush and clean the brush off, and then we'll get some fresh tissue and we'll just moisten the brush. We don't want it soaking wet, we don't want to flood it because that's going to get into all our grooves. What we want is the brush to be moist so we can just take it over the surface and start thinning down some of that wash. So it's almost like dry brushing, but now I've got some thinner on there, I can just wipe and you can see how that is just settling where we want it. And when I come to paint it, where it's not so rough, that's where the paint will be. So that's given me quite a nice aged look to that wood already, so I'm quite happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to carry on cleaning that up and I'll get back to you when it's done. Give you a closer look. Right, that is our woodwork done, but what I want to do now is have some faded and slightly peeled remaining paint left on there, just bits and pieces to give it a more aged look. What we've got is a nice looking piece of woodwork at the moment, but I want to show that it was at one point painted. And if we think about the time period where we're setting the model, then probably it was painted in the 1920s, and then when finances got hard through the 30s it was neglected, and obviously then the wars come along, so it's probably not had anything done to it for 20 years maybe. So we want to show that as part of the story in the paintwork. So we're going to get our paint and thin it down a little bit more. What I don't want to do is turn it into a wash particularly. And this is going to be a little bit labour intensive, but what I want to do is just show that there was once paintwork on here. And then that when I've had a look at eaves, what tends to happen is this doesn't get any contact with anything, so it's not wearing, it's just fading with sunlight and just naturally perishing. So we're not chipping here, we're not dry brushing because we're not highlighting. What we're doing is we're painting in where the paint has managed to cling on. And you can see with thinning the paint we've made it a little bit more translucent. So it's almost like you're starting to see through it a little bit where it's wearing. And what we can do then is go over and put some heavier paint in areas to make that look like it was put on thicker there and so needs more wearing. Now again, just like with the cobbles, we don't want to end up with a pattern and have it dashed, so we need to think about that. So I'm going to use some of the grain here as a guide. Now you expect that on the ends the paint would be sort of the thickest, so I want to make sure there's some there. And underneath you get less weather, so we want to show more paint. And for me, one of the areas where the paint is going to hang on the most is in that groove. And what we're doing is we're just dotting it with the paint, and when it dries in nice and matte, it will just hopefully look like paint that's worn over time, which is the idea. And you keep going at it until you're happy you've done what you need to do. I think the secret is to do it gradually and build it up gradually. As always with painting, less is more. So that is our woodwork done. And what we want to do now is just let all of that dry, and then we'll give it a seal with varnish. And then we're going to go in and give it another wash just to key in the paintwork that we've put it on. Although most of where we've painted, there is very little texture underneath. But we still want to just key it in, so we'll use a little bit of that, very heavily thinned, just to key it all in. So everything else needs a flat varnish as well, so we'll give everything a flat varnish, and then we can start doing some work on these other bits. Right, time to get some paint down. We're going to start with a primer. I'm using this red-brown primer. It's a really nice surface primer actually. Sometimes need to thin it, sometimes I don't. Brush painting I certainly generally thin it ever so slightly. It sort of depends on the temperature. It's quite warm again today, so I might end up thinning this. We'll have a look in a minute. My first job though is just to get any debris away and give our models a dust down. Shouldn't be anything because it's been stored in a lidded box since I completed the build element. But better to be safe than sorry. It's also a good test of whether everything's stuck on. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is just test that the airbrush is working properly. What I don't want to do is put some paint in and then find there's a problem and we've got to strip it. So I'm just going to put a dash of water in. I'll make sure that that's flowing alright before we go any further. Yeah, no problems there. Right, we've given this a good shake already, but we'll just decant some in. I think we'll thin that down a little bit. She's had a first prime. I tend to do German tanks in the sort of primed colour that they would have been in originally. So we've done that, so that is ready for paint, and we're going to be using this from Life Colour. So we need to get that sorted out and put that down, but we haven't primed yet the wheels or the tracks. So we've got quite a few wheels to paint up. I'm going to prime them in grey because I want those to show up darker than the rest of the body. Then we've got some washes to do and dry brushing and all that sort of good stuff. So we're going to prime all that grey, and then we'll use the same Life Colour. So the starting point is to get these primed so that when we've got this mixed and ready to go, we can do the whole tank in one go. Okay, so our life colour has gone down really nicely actually. I've never used them on armoured fighting vehicles before. I've only used them for ships, and they're my preferred acrylic for model ships, but it's gone down really nicely. I'm really happy with the finish. The next thing I want to do is give it a wash. I'm going to be using this, which is a brown blue wash for Panzer Grey, as you can see from MIG. I've not used it before. I bought it purposely for this and one or two other things I've got in the stash that will be Panzer Grey. I've got a couple of new products on the dry brushing. I've got a couple of purpose-built dry brushing brushes. They look a little bit like makeup brushes, don't they? But yeah, the idea is you can go in any direction with these brushes, and they'll work for your dry brushing. So I've never tried them before, so we're going to trial them, and then we'll talk a bit more about them on a tools video at some point. And we're going to be trying a new product, which is dry brush paint. So again, another MIG Ammo product, and this is Panzer Grey Dio dry brush paint. So I'm going to give that a go and see what we think. Two very distinctly different colours going on a distinctly different colour. So it'd be interesting to see what effects we get with that, whether I like it, whether I'm respraying the whole thing, who knows. But time to revisit the house, and we're going to look at the blue paintwork that we've done on the 3 windows and the door. So unlike the roof where we painted it all and weathered it all as wood and then put the blue paint on to simulate some peeled paint, I want a little bit more paint here. So we're doing it in a different approach, and we're going to be putting the wood effect on top of the paint. So completely opposite way of doing it, but hopefully when it's done you'll see how the 2 different things have worked. So I'm primarily using some MIG Ammo colours for this. I've got New Wood, which is 37. I've got Light Wood, which is 38, and I've got old wood, which is 36. I've also got Vallejo orange brown, which is 981, and I really like this as a sort of an aged wood colour. I use it a lot on things like tool handles and stuff, and I use it a lot for mixing. It's a really good colour to add to buffs and browns, to just add a slightly different dimension. So I don't know whether I'm using this or not yet, but it's there on standby because I do quite often use it. I'm going to be using ultimate thinners for this. I don't have MIG acrylic thinners, but this does the job fine. And we're going to be using a 10-0 brush to actually paint the chips on where we want them. Now, I could get a sponge and dab it with a sponge and all that sort of stuff. The trouble with sponges is they give you a very random pattern, and paint doesn't wear randomly. So it wears where it's coming into contact with something, or where it's being aged by weather or water conditions or whatever. So there's a reason why paint deteriorates. It's not random. So I don't want to do random chipping with a sponge. It's a very nice effect and everything, but it's not natural. So I'm going to go and put it where I want it with the brushes, and we'll see how it goes. I'm also going to nip onto the internet and have a look at some reference pictures of old wooden doors and see what it comes up with. Right, I've been looking at some pictures of both wooden doors and wooden blinds, and it's given me some good ideas on how this should all look. And it really depends on how old you want it to look, how far you go. I'm going to start with new wood, which strangely is the darkest of the paints, and I might end up adding a little bit of orange brown to this, because this is going to be the most extensive colour that we put on, and then we'll be putting less of each of the other colours, and then we may well be doing some we will be doing a wash, definitely, but we might also do some highlighting in a lightened version of the blue once we've darkened it all down a bit. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the wood, and I'm going to also put the orange brown in the palette next door so we can mix that up if we have to. So I think that probably is a little bit too light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix these colours together a little bit. Off we go. Now, the trick with a door is to break it down into its wooden panels, so that we want to paint in the direction of the grain of the wood, and we know that the wood is going with the length of the panels. So for example, the grain's going that way on that panel, and it's going that way on that panel. So that's because we want to paint it following the grain. It's been a little while since we last did any work on this, so worth giving that a clean up. Okay. So, exposed surfaces go the worst, and the bottom of the door is always more heavily worn than the top. Is basically how this is going to work. And what we want to do is try and highlight the panels a little bit. So you can see what we're trying to achieve. So we'll do that throughout the full width of the door. That is my first colour down on the door, and it's looking suitably scruffy now. Just going to have a go at the shutters next. So similar sort of process. The frame weathers much more than the slats do, and the slats tend to weather a little bit in the middle, and yeah, so probably worse at the bottom than the top where water collects, drips down and so on. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so first lot of paint is down. Door most heavy because it gets the most traffic. Then we've got the shutters, which we've dry brushed in the middle and then just painted around the frames as we need to. And a little bit on the windows, but not too much because it's much more protected from the elements and less used than the rest of it. So the next thing is to get another colour on there. We're going with this new wood that looks like quite dark wood really, and we're going to start with that and see what that looks like. Okay, you can see what we've done is we've highlighted sort of a fresh look wood, so where there's a little bit of more recent wear and tear, and then we can blend all of that in with a wash. I don't think I want to do it on anything other than the door, and we're just doing it around the area that's going to get high impact. I think we'll probably leave it at that. So next thing is a wash. Okay, the wood that we've painted on to give us a bit more of a used effect on the paintwork is all well dry. So I've now mixed a wash, the wash for wood from MIG Productions, using their thinner to further thin it from the bottle. It's the same as we used in the top there, so it's going to key in, and we're going to use that to darken the woodwork in places and show some age, and basically just give it a pin wash. I'm using a detail brush to get stuck into the detail here, and it's going to be put over areas where we've put the wood and areas where we haven't, and places where we've not got a great demarcation. It's great for showing that detail. So let's see how that's coming out. We can also use it to show different ages of wood. So and as this is going to be a sort of early winter scene, we can also use it to highlight dampness and of the wood and things like that if we wish to. It's surprising how the detail just sort of pops out. So I'm going to put a little bit on the top surface and just using that as a sort of shader. There we go. And we can also use it where we're showing some joins in the wood. So there, for example, and that's also going to add a sort of aged effect. So you get the idea on the door. We'll do the same with the window frames. There's been a lot less wood chipping on the window frames, and we'll concentrate mainly on the bottom to make it heavier. On the shutters, then obviously what we want to do is concentrate on the edges and not so much in the middle. And then on this bottom one, we'll do the whole of the bottom of the frame just to make it look that bit darker. You know, it's where all the water soaks down to and what have you. So, and maybe around the hinges a little bit. There, you get the idea. I'm going to carry on and I'll come back to you when it's done. Okay, so that is the weathering done using this dark sort of wooden wash. It's helped me get a really nice worn edged look on the door and the rest of the woodwork. It's still flashing off so that you're not perhaps getting the final effect of it at the moment, but you can see we've done some work to highlight things. Using several coats you can darken areas and what have you, just to add different effects. So whilst I've got some still in my palette, I want to come and revisit the barn because we can do a little bit more work on the door and the window here using the same process. So I've got to say, I'm really happy with how the door shaped up, but I do want to just further highlight some of the planks. And again, we're just pin washing here. And it gives me an opportunity to highlight some of the other details, like the nails that are holding the structure of the planks together. Now I know it says it's for wood, but that doesn't prevent us from putting it on things that are not wood. It's just a dark wash at the end of the day. Okay, there we go. So we've got the brickwork to do on this, and then we can do a bit more weathering, and we've got snow and stuff to put on it and so on. So we can put these away, and I think our next thing to look at is the gutter for that.